All right, I am recording. Hello. I am here. I'm gonna read the last, let's see, the last 40, the last like 40 pages or something like that. Apparently I can't do math right now. Hold on. I need to know exactly what maths. Shit. So, I have, holy shit. I have 37 more pages left. Can you believe that? That's insane. And I want to say thank you for, I know, right? It's not that much. And it's scary to think about because all things end at one point. Hashtag Unisonus. Dab, 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 dab. But yeah, this is my Unas. Honest. Not moo. I was almost gonna say moo, but no, I want to say memento mori. We'll see you tomorrow. Also, I recommend that channel. It has Markiplier and Ethan, and they are great. They are my boys. I love watching them with my boyfriend because it makes us laugh. Go follow them. They're not going to be around too soon. Just like this book is going to end, they're going to end too, so. No, I was not paid in any sort of way to promote them. I'm just saying they're really cool and you should check out their channel. It has it spelled right there. Unisonus. There we go. Okay, I am proud of myself. But honestly, thank you so much. Thank you for, staying with me and listening to me talk. Okay. I will most likely cry because that's just how it is. All right. So we left off. May and the gang were heading. They found a hole in the ground, and it leads to to the Beauclevel's castle. And it's also like underground, and that's where they saw like spirits being chained up and stuff. So they have gone down there, and they have pretended that they're chained spirits as well. Spirits, ghosts, whatever you name it. So now we are at part 3. So part 3, the last part of the last book. Man, thank you so much. Okay. Also, you can hear me, right, Chandler? I'm talking a little soft, but I think you can hear me. Cool. All right. So part 3, scared of the dark. And this is chapter 30. I think there's 36. I think. Yes, 36, and then the epilogue. Okay. Okay. Ugh, my heart's pumping because I'm getting so nervous because I don't want it to end. Oh, dude. Bro, yeah. Oh, fuck. I love this book so much. Okay, I gotta stop talking and start reading. Hold on, wait. My parents are watching Coraline, and I heard the freaking beep beep when the guy scares her at first, and I'm just like, is that Coraline? Yeah, that's Coraline. Sorry, I just got distracted by that. Okay, I will actually read right now. God. Okay, so chapter 30. In the heart of all bad things. A trail of captives wended its way through the gates of Beauclevel's fortress, two mummies leading them. Like so many, their eyes were downcast, their spirits dim. The gates closed behind May and the others with a sickening thud. The scene that opened up before them was even worse than what it had seemed from above. The pathways winding up the dark hills to the foot of the great castle were paved with bones, each engraved with intricate patterns. Arching on either side of the narrow, bony streets were dark, dead trees, all twisted into the shape of a spirit in a long trench coat, in a white-brimmed hat. Clevo, May thought. The dark spirits, still numbering in the thousands even after the departure of so many, leaped and danced across the area, prodding prisoners with their spears, growling and snarling, their mouths gaping, dripping with drool. And the whole scene was lit by flashes of lightning in the dusky sky. May could feel her chains rattling as all the free spirits, connected in a row like dominoes, began to quiver with dread. May studied the chains around her wrists and her waist. They were connected, so that they only locked, and could fall off easily. She hoped the shivers passed. Everywhere there were spirits in chains, from every walk of life, tribesmen with bones through their noses, gaggles of sad, lost-looking schoolchildren, ancient Egyptians, Babylonians, Vikings, geishas, monks, showgirls, cabaret dancers. One corpulent, one corpulent character, incredibly large, his head adorned with a crown of thistles. Ghosts of Christmas past, Pumpkin whispered, still trembling. Then he added, slightly lower, I wonder if he brought any presents with him. Pumpkin, shh! May knew that when Pumpkin got nervous, sometimes he tended to babble. I should have stayed in the pit of despair. I had a great life there. A pool, a Lorelei, a... Hey, is that Marilyn Monroe? Pumpkin! Fabio, next in line behind him, hissed. All around, spirits cried and sighed. Those who weren't crying had their eyes hopelessly and sadly downcast. Without exception, every one of them was part of an assembly line. Uh, Putting bits of plastic together. What are they doing? May whispered to Bee, who was in front of her. Beauclevel's fortress is the universe's largest exporter of Titantia. I don't even know how to pronounce this. I don't know what she was going with this. Let me try and... I feel like this is a made-up word. Hold Hold on. It's a weird spelled something. I know I missed a word. That's how it's spelled. I'm gonna look it up and see what it says. But I feel like it's a made up word. If not, then damn. That's a really weird spelled. Oh, I got a hit. Oh, it is a thing. Chachika. Chachika. It's spelled chachika. Chachikas. Okay. It's like a trinket. Ah. Oh, it's a Yiddish word. Chachka. Okay. Cool. I learned a new word today that I apparently didn't learn when I first read this book. Or maybe I just ignored it. Chachka. Okay. Nice. Ah, I see. Cool. Very cool. Okay. Now we know what that word is. Chachkas. Clevel's fortress is the universe's largest exporter of tchotchkes. Bee whispered back, barely audible. Tchotchkes, May remembered her mom explaining once, were cheap things people bought when they really didn't need. They were the exact opposite of handcrafted North Farm blankets and fine silver arrows and everlasting cookies. They had no beauty or purpose. People only bought them to have them. May remembered something John the Gibberer had once said about why he hoarded treasure. To have it. May, when someone fell behind or stepped out of line, they were picked up and carried into the castle. Sorry. Sorry, I got distracted again. Yeah. When someone fell behind or stepped out of line, they were picked up and carried into the castle. May looked up toward the castle, then peered upward to where it disappeared into the sky, thinking of Clevel, way up top. I've got to make my way in there, she whispered. Their plan was to make it close to the castle, and for May to somehow slip out of the line unnoticed and sneak inside, while the others got ready for whatever came next. From the 50 or so ghouls guarding the gaping, rotten doorway, hundreds of balloons announcing Clevel's number 1 tied to the door handles. She could see they should have come up with a different plan. May peered around thinking, but suddenly she saw someone that drove all thoughts from her head. It was a familiar figure among the sea of faces. By the way she felt Pumpkin jerk behind her, she knew he had seen it too. Hold on. Sorry. Alright. May peered around thinking, but suddenly she saw something that drove all thoughts from her head. It was a familiar figure among a sea of faces. By the way she felt Pumpkin jerk behind her, she knew he had seen it too. Somewhere in the middle of one of the assembly lines, his head downcast and his antennae drooping, stood Arista, the beekeeper. Only he was not the Arista May knew. He was slouched and broken and dim. Uh, uh, Pumpkin sputtered behind her. Pumpkin, shh! She could tell Pumpkin was using every last bit of strength he had not to squeal. And then she felt a tug, stronger this time. She turned just in time to see Pumpkin's eyes cross and his hands flutter up in the air. And then he fainted dead away, falling right on top of Fabio. Rip Boris. It's actually Arista, but maybe you're making a joke. Rip Boris. Oh, whoops. Oh, I guess you did think it was Arissa, but it was Arista. Oh no. It sounds kind of close though. Uh, yeah, and then she felt a tug, stronger this time. She turned just in time to see Pumpkin's eyes cross and his hands flitter up in the air, and then he fainted dead away, falling right on top of Fabio. One after the next, and in quick succession, the free spirits went down like dominoes, their chains flying off their wrists, their robes thrown into disarray. Within seconds, they all lay splayed on the ground on top of one another, water balloons and slingshots and arrows tumbling onto the dark ground. May, pulled down with them, felt her robe fly open, her glorious black bathing suit, full of supernovas and galaxies, was revealed. Her, her sparkling arrows gleamed. All around, the dark spirits stopped what they were doing. Prisoners everywhere looked up from their tasks. In the moments that followed, May knew she had to think fast. She looked back toward the castle. There was only a moment to decide. She would run for it. The world behind Beauclevel's gates burst into chaos. Vikings leaped from their work tables and pulled gulls' hairs. Vampires chased Vegas showgirls who decided to make a run for it while still chained together. The knaves, always resourceful, jumped up from the ground and chased a group of goblins with their water guns. A group of Wistfallers sprang into action, running to and fro, unraveling a gang of mummies. Thousands of spirits rose up from their chains and began to turn on their captors, and their captors, fierce and fearless, fought back. In the dim, May unclasped herself from Pumpkin. She leaned over him and took his face in her hands. He was just coming to, blinking at her dazedly. Hide! Hide! She said, knowing he could never handle a battle such as the one they were beginning to fight. And then she turned and ran toward the castle. She unleashed her arrows as she ran, each shot true, turning dark spirits into stone everywhere they appeared, and pulling her arrows from them as quickly as she shot them. Finally, she verged on the dark, gaping door of the castle, deserted now that its guards were deep in the fray. She looked over her shoulder to check once on her friends. Fabio was running from two goblins throwing their shoes at him. Lucius was, Lucius was piggybacking a zombie. Beatrice was flinging screaming skulls from behind a tombstone. Pumpkin, having taken May's advice, was nowhere to be seen. May breathed a sigh of relief, and then she felt the coldness of the castle breathe onto her back, and the relief faded. She took one last shot, hitting one of Fabia's pursuers, and then she took two steps backward and disappeared inside. And that is the end of chapter 30. Oh, God. Right? It's, oh, God. Fuck, dude. I don't want this to end. I mean, I still have, like, I'm on, I still have much more pages to go on, but still, it's like, goddamn. Okay. Chapter 31. In the castle. The great doors creaked behind her, and May turned just as they slammed shut. She swallowed, then looked around, lowering her arrows. She was in a great hall, smelling of old wet wood and lined with giant root threads. She could still hear the battle raging behind her, muffled and seeming far away. Somewhere farther within the castle, she could hear a mournful howling. Howling, yeah. The cool, musty air sat on her arms. She felt that somehow Beauclerville knew she was here. There was an air of waiting all around her, as if the castle were a breathing, living thing, watching. At the end of the hall was a great stone archway. May approached it slowly, looking this way and that, wary of what might emerge from the shadows. But she passed safely to the end of the hall, where, under the archway, a flight of stairs stretched downward into the darkness. May backed up and peered around. There was no other doorway, no other hall, no stairs leading up. She put her hand against the wall, then slowly drifted downward. Click, click, click. Tap, tap, tap. Tap, tap, tap. May kept close against the wall as she found herself moving closer and closer to the sounds coming from below. She reached a soggy wooden landing and carefully peered around the corner into a great dripping room where hundreds of shadows moved in the dimness. She could just make out those couldn't be what she really thought they were. But yes, it was all too real. Beauclerville's basement was filled with monkeys. Monkeys tapping away on typewriters. May emerged a little farther into the room, puzzled. The monkeys kept their eyes on their typewriters, too busy to acknowledge her, though occasionally one of them scratched under their armpits, unable to help being a monkey after all. She drifted up to one of their desks and lifted a huge pile of papers. My 1001st bestseller by Beauclerville. May shook her head in disbelief. Laying the papers back down, she gave the monkey nearest her a gentle pat on the head, and then she continued onward, toward another doorway at the end of the room. Holding her arrows aloft, she drifted through it and into a room full of wooden staircases, stretching in every direction, up, down, sideways, left, right. May, thinking of the battle raging outside, knew she had no time to waste. She zipped up the staircase nearest to her, but it ended in a ceiling 2 stories above. She raced back down and tried another. The monkey room. Yeah, it is really silly. I was like reading that. I'm like, That's very random. I don't know if I thought that when I first read this, but it is really random. But also remember, this is a book for middle school students. This is a book for kids. So, even though it sounds really scary, the book is still going to be goofy because, I read this when I was in middle school. It doesn't really, but I don't know what the author was thinking, but I don't know. At this point at the in the game of the goddamn book, it should be just serious. But I don't know, since maybe people do like for the intended audience, they don't want it to be too scary, I guess, in a way, or too real. They have to have some sort of like, oh, it's not real. See, monkey room. But I get what you mean. Right? I don't know if we get this in this chapter. I think so. I'm not sure. Hold on. Yeah, dude, I thought it was gonna be like a room full of like other dark spirits or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. All right. But I think it gets a little bit more serious um now at this point. I think, but I can't guarantee anything. Okay. Yeah. May, thinking of the battle raging outside, knew she had no time to waste. She zipped up the staircase nearest to her, but it ended in a ceiling 2 stories above. She raced back down and tried another. This one ended in a window leading to the outside. May tried 10 tear scases. Tear scases. Jesus. May tried 10 staircases before she found one that led to a long wooden hallway, 10 flights up. Scarecases. Scarecases. Missed opportunity. That's true. It was a missed opportunity. Yeah, May tried 10 staircases before she found one that led to a long wooden hallway, 10 flights up. The soggy floor dotted with large rotted holes. She wove her way around them as quickly as she could, then stopped short. She could hear voices, somewhere far below, singing. She strained her ears to hear what they were saying. 1,000,000, no, 1,300,000, 1,300,072 bottles of Slurpee soda on the wall. 1,300,072 bottles of Slurpee soda. May dropped down onto her belly. splaying her arms out to hold her bow and arrow, and peered into the hole, her black hair falling down on either side of her face like curtains. May could just make out, maybe 5 stories down, the tops of a group of ghostly heads. "Hey, who's up there?" one of them shouted. Maybird gasped, and ducked back, and then crept forward again. Maybe it was something. Maybe it was someone who was on her side. "Maybird," she called tremulously. "Who's down there?" "Maybird, Maybird, Maybird." She all heard them mutter to one another, and then a cheer went up. "Shh," she hissed. "We heard you were going to save us, but we didn't believe it." May gulped. "Are you okay? If you call being trapped for all eternity okay." Laughter echoed up toward her. May didn't think it was very funny, but she guessed they had to have some way to pass the time. How many are you in here?" "Thousands! All trapped all over the castle." "No, thousands! Trapped all over the castle." "Thousands more!" There was a loud whispering below, and then the voice spoke up again. "Copernicus wants me to tell you we'll spread the word you're here," the spirit shouted. May nibbled her bottom lip nervously, thinking of all those spirits throughout the castle who would be ready and waiting to be rescued. "Listen! I need to find my way to Cleeville," she shouted. "Choose the 7th hall to the right," Somebody yelled. May sat up and looked around. There was no hall but one. Below, the voices resumed singing. She floated on, this time into an enormous room full of glinting gold and silver and jewels. There were golden statues and gilded treasure chests marked "Property of Bluebeard." Sorry, just like trying to adjust myself. There were golden statues, a gilded treasure chest marked "Property of Bluebird," a gleaming sapphire the size of her head. Surrounding the room were several hallways. May, realizing what she was supposed to do, chose the 7th hall to the right, and soon found herself in a room full of carnival rides. She let out a surprised, saddened breath. It was the carnival at the edge of the world. Beau Cleeville had stolen it and locked it up in a room. There were countless more rooms like this, full of wonders. May could have never guessed at, and some she had already seen. There was a room so immense it contained the zipping stars that Beau Cleeville had stolen from the sky. A sign above the door read, "This view copyrighted Beau Cleeville Enterprises, LLC." Here, lights bounced off May's face as if she were at a disco. Another room was full of the beautiful magnolia flowers of the Ladies' North Farm tree, wilted and brown. May stood, staring at their wilted beauty. She thought she had begun, finally, to understand evil Beau Cleeville. It wasn't enough for him to see beautiful things. He wanted to have them only for himself. What made a soul want? What made a soul want to take so much from everyone else? Right? That is cool. It's supposed to say moan, so I'm just saying. May started and turned. The moaning that had accompanied her faintly since she'd entered the castle, was now suddenly much louder. She peered down the dark wooden tunnel from whence it seemed to come. "Hello?" she ventured, her voice wavering. "Are you hurt?" Uh. It seemed, at that moment, like the saddest sound in all the world. "Do you need help?" she whispered. She stepped forward, and suddenly the ground beneath her moved, and she was flung backward, and her bow and arrows went flying off into the darkness. She found herself trapped in a cart of some sort. The floor of the hall before her disappeared, revealing a set of tracks stretching ahead into the darkness. "Intruders forbidden," a sign flashed brightly just above her head. "Have a nice day." May tried to scramble out. May tried to scramble out, but it was too late. She was rolling forwards. She was rolling slowly forward, and then the ground began to tilt downward, and the cart accelerated, ascending just slightly over the rise. May's stomach dropped out as soon as the cart slowly took an edge that seemed to drop off into nothing, and then it tilted forward, revealing the breathtaking scene below. A great room, hundreds of stories deep, walled with stained glass on all sides, like the inside of a church. For the moment that the cart tottered above it all, May could make out the scenes on the glass. All of a dark figure with glowing red eyes, reaching toward her. In another moment, she was hurtling down. She felt like her cheeks were blowing backward off her face. The cart flew down, 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 and just as May thought it would crash right into the ground, it reversed direction, turning upward again, hurtling at top speed, zooming up, 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 impossibly high, what seemed to be as high as the very top of the castle, zipping into a zipping into a square opening gleaming with light and mirrors. Etched along the mirrors were the words, "I am the fairest of them all." And then the words were gone, and May was hurtling toward a big black wall that gave way just as she was about to hit it. Booming laughter sounded all around her, shaking the cart and the tracks. "Maybird!" His voice, boomed, and then the wall opened up in front of her. She had only a second to gasp, and then the cart stopped short and flung her right out of the opening. May was suspended in the air for a moment, miles above the ground below, with nothing to grab onto but empty space. She could see the tiny figures far beneath her, fighting on the ground, and then she was plummeting to the world below. And that is the end of chapter 31. Hey, it's the Tower of Terror. Yeah, it is the Tower of Terror. Oh my god. Dude, I'm not ready. We're on 218 right now. We're on 218 right now out of 244. I don't. It's not gonna get. I just. I can't. It's. I just. Okay. Alright. This chapter is also going to be very short. And then that next chapter is going to be a little longer, but short too. Oh, fuck. Oh, man. Okay. Chapter 32. The Meaning of Lost. May didn't just land on the ground. She landed in the ground. She lay there for a few moments, blinking up at the dark sky. Was she dead? She tried her arms and legs, found she could wiggle them, and reached up to pull herself out of the hole she'd made with her landing. She crawled out, stood up on wobbly legs, and began to float again. Not an ache or pain in her entire body. Of course! She was dead. Nothing could hurt her. She turned around, gaping at the hole in the ground where she'd landed, the same size as her body. It looked like a snow angel. She smiled, full of giddy relief. She wanted to leap up and down with joy. But it only took a moment to snap back to reality. It started with the specter in a jumpsuit being flung across her line of vision. She looked around. The free spirits were being beaten badly. Everywhere, spirits that had risen up in revolt were stuffed into wire cages, their arms and legs dangling out helplessly. Zero and several other of the whisk followers were bound together by a length of fiery rope, struggling to get free. The knaves had turned tail and were trying to climb up the great gates to escape, only to be plucked off one by a horde of goblins. It seemed that the number of dark spirits had multiplied by 20, and they were quickly overcoming their enemies like a tidal wave. May could see Lucius, far off in the crowd, surrounded by a group of zombies, his fists in front of him gamely, making a show of being unafraid, but clearly trapped. "No," she whispered. And then a crackle overhead drew her eyes up into the air above. A long, thin line of black mist had begun to coil there, like a snake, darkening the already dark sky. May reached for her arrows, her hand brushing against something slimy. In a moment, the sliminess gripped her, and she swiveled just in time to see a goal before he wrapped his arms around her and lifted her into the air. May kicked and writhed. "No!" Beside her, she could see that another ghoul, floating down from the castle, had her bow and arrows and was breaking the arrows in two, one by one. He got to the last bow. May struggled helplessly as he gave her a toothy, drooly smile and snapped it in half. As she was being carried toward the castle, May could see Lucius in between two goblins, being swung back and forth like a jump rope. Fluffy and Beatrice had been tied back to back and were being rolled along the ground, all around. Their companions were meeting similar fates. As May squirmed to no avail, the lady's words echoed in her ears. "You will fail." A great cheer began to bubble up from the dark spirits. May felt herself being swept in the direction of the castle. And that is the end of chapter 32. Oh, fuck, dude. Oh, God. After this chapter that's coming up, not after this chapter, after the next chapter, it's gonna be the big one. And I don't know how I'm gonna be able to deal with it. Because, oh, fuck, I can't. Oh, my God. Okay. Chapter 33. Chapter 33. An Ancient Trick. May didn't speak Ghoul, but she was pretty sure the ghouls were discussing whether to eat her now or lock her up and eat her later. She barely registered the low rumbling that had begun to shake the ground beneath them, until the goal that was carrying her lost his footing and stumbled forward. Ah, awesome. I just read ahead. I'm like, oh, fuck yeah. I forgot about this part. Um, where was I? I was. Yeah, she barely registered the low rumbling that had begun to shake the ground beneath them until the that was carrying her lost his footing and stumbled forward. The ominous rumbling grew louder, and the ground shook more violently until all the spirits, good and evil, were tumbling into one another, landing in scattered knots. Screams and howls erupted everywhere, and then suddenly and mysteriously, the shaking stopped. For a moment, everyone was silent, staring at one another, bewildered. They all looked up at the sky, where the dark mist had begun to circle tighter and tighter. The dark spirits, collecting themselves, gabbled and laughed. Hagabubble! They all shrieked one another, which in English means, now they're really in for it. But another tremor drew their attention, not to the sky, but to the great black gates of the fortress. The skulls etched on its surface began to contort and howl. Whatever was making the earth shake was coming from out there. The dark spirit's laughter evaporated. Suddenly, there was a huge crash as something made an enormously, oddly shaped indentation in the metal gates. There was a moment of eerie silence, and then another crash. The gate gave way completely, caving in with a groan. The thing that was waiting behind it came smashing through. Everyone watched in awe as it reeled in toward them, 50 stories high at least, its enormous head rearing far above, far above, and then it came to a halt. The ghouls scratched their heads. The goblins muttered amongst themselves. It was a moment of complete and utter shock. Only May and a handful of ancient Egyptians had an idea of what it might mean. Breathless, May gazed at the structure from the bottom up, past the wheels, the body, her eyes lighting on something very small, moving way on top. She squinted, and a moment later she was sure. A solitary figure perched majestically on the nose of, a, of the giant wooden mouse, gazing on the scene below like a conquering warrior. The tiniest sound issued from its mouth. Meow. And then the bottom of the wooden mouse burst out from its hinges, and out poured horses, ducks, monkeys, elephants, kangaroos, snakes, two-toed sloths, tigers, antelopes, every luminous animal spirit the ever after contained. It was like the old MacDonald had a farm of the dead. The screams of the dark spirits could be heard for miles. Every goblin Every ghoul, goblin, zombie, and vampire dropped what they were doing and ran, pouring around the castle, trying to find places to hide. The animals followed, full of righteous fury, stampeding every dark spirit in their path until they were all stuck deep into the dirt, their arms waving for help perfectly flat. Everywhere, dark spirits ran crying for their mummies. Yeah, this is where it gets a little cringy. Like a little, like, eh. above them. Above them, the dark mist spread across the sky, circling wildly. At 6 p.m. on the planet Earth, just after dusk, a strange news bulletin appeared on Channel 7. According to several eyewitnesses, the reporter said a mummy had lurched right into the middle of Prickly Valley's pig pickin' jamboree and made off with the pig. Everyone thought it was a joke. By 7 p.m., several similar reports had begun to come in from all over the world, and people weren't so sure. In Tokyo, a gaggle of goblins invaded the Bill Blast Bill Blast trunk sale and picked out several nice things before chasing the attendees into the streets. In Northern California, a troop of ghouls stumbled into a vegetarian potlatch and ate one of the participants. In Mexico City, Mexico, several vampires were seen bursting from the graves of a local cemetery and heading straight for the nearest taco stand, scooping up several unsuspecting tourists in their wake to use as toppings. Far above, the unknown star, the far above, the star known as the Ever After, flickered and went out. By the by the time calls started pouring in from panicked shoppers in Henhaven, New Jersey, and Fenhaven, New Jersey, Green Willow, Wisconsin, and Pleasantville, Florida, the world had begun to realize that the reports were all too real. Zombies had invaded the malls. And that is the end of chapter 33. That one was a little silly. Yes, it was. But in a whatever sort of way. Not in this universe. Well, it is terrifying because they said goblins were actually eating people. Well, she did say that goblins were like eating people too. Yeah, goblins were eating people. Ghouls were eating people. The book doesn't say how many casualties there were, but I'm pretty sure there was a lot. But then she added zombies had invaded the mall. I know. I had read forward, and I read that, and I'm just like, yeah, this is still a book for kids. I swear it'll start. Hold on. I think this chapter and onward, it's just serious with like little jokes in between, but not like not like this. Okay, I'm not ready for this one. I'm not ready for this one because after this chapter, it's the chapter that's gonna hurt me. This chapter hurts. It hurts a lot. Okay. Chapter 34. Fuck, dude. We're 224 right now. We have 20 more pages. Oh my god. Dude, that's so unreal. Okay. Let me just drink some water. Okay. God, this is Okay, chapter 34. A bird at last. Reaching for her arrows and remembering with a pang that they were gone, Meg watched the chaos erupt all around her. A loud whistling drew her attention upward. The black swirling mist in the sky had whipped itself into a violent frenzy, and it was beginning to take a familiar shape, stretching itself downward into a kind of funnel. May's stomach flopped. She leaped out of the way as a rhinoceros stampeded past her, a babbling gull clinging to its horn for dear life. Up by the castle entrance, she spied a goblin trying to bribe a llama with a pair of Harry Winston earrings. Gorillas were untying the captives in droves. Somebody was directing the animals from atop his perch, and about 20 feet away, a trembling yellow tuft poked out from behind a particularly out-of-the-way boulder. She surveyed the vast array of spirits on the ground, unaware of what was happening above them, then peered toward the castle doors again. There, the Bo Clevel's #1 balloons bobbled wildly in the swelling breeze. May took a deep breath, looking at the forbidding sky above once again. But there wasn't time for anything else. Minutes later, she was ready. Yeah, minutes later, she was ready. She had tied her shoe with one of the door. She had tied her shoe onto the doorknobs, then tied the balloons to herself, one by one, until finally she was floating, her body straining hard against the shoelace that held her anchored. She looked up into the sky, taking a deep, ragged breath, and then she swooped downward awkwardly and untied her shoe, sending it flying off. Or rather, it was she who went flying off, up, up, up in the air, the world getting smaller and smaller beneath her. She didn't hear the tiny, questioning meow, meow that issued from Somber Kitty's mouth as he watched her soar upward. And she didn't think that one creature with a crooked squash-shaped head and a trembling yellow tuft saw her from the ground and crept out from behind his boulder, running for the castle doors, soaring upward and utterly alone. May didn't see that help was on the way. She was a bird at last. And that's the end of chapter 34. Okay, I will guarantee you this will be, my heart's just racing right now. This will be a hard it's just hard. Oh my god. We're at 2:28 right now. Whew, whew. I don't know how to deal with this. Okay. Physically too, my fingers are getting all sweaty. Yeah. Right? Ugh. Okay. Chapter 35. The Bridge of Souls. May's hands ran along the cold, rotten wood of Bo Clevel's castle, controlling her ascent with clutching fingers and keeping her eyes on the swirling sky above. Her heart was in her throat as she saw the red glow of Clevel's window approaching, and then she was upon it. And in a split second, she was shoving her hands out to grip the windowsill, pulling with all her might to drag herself inside. And then she was scurrying to untie herself, peering into the red dimness for the slightest hint of movement. There was nothing. The room was empty. As the eternal edifice had been filled with colors and light, The walls of this room were obscured with dark, dense shadows. The room contained only an elaborately set table. At the end of the table sat a shiny red. At the end of the table sat a shiny red apple on a plate, and in the middle lay a thick book. May didn't have time. May didn't have to look closer to know what the book was. She drifted toward it, looking this way and that, wondering. She reached out her hand, and the book, all on its own, flew open, its pages flipping wildly. You still know? You want to know if it still says what it did? A voice said out of the darkness. May swiveled around, checking back up against the back. I cannot read. Ah. May swiveled around, backing up against the table. About you saving the world. May stood perfectly still, peering about, unable to see anyone. There was a sound of air moving, a whisper of fabric. She swallowed, shrinking back farther against the table. Out of the corner of her eye, she spotted a dark, rotten doorway. She slid in that direction. You might want to take a look out the window first. May appeared in that direction. Why? She asked. There was no answer. She gave the doorway one more longing look, then floated, ever so slowly, toward the window. And then she froze in horror. The dark mist filling the sky had swirled itself into a full-blown tornado, as tall as the castle itself. May rushed to the windowsill to peer down at the world below. The tornado's tip was tearing along the valley, picking up spirits in its wake and swirling them into the sky. No! May choked. As she watched, the spirits on the ground, both good and bad, were swept up into the storm. The great wooden mouse, which looked toy-sized from far above, rattled on its foundations before it, too, disappeared into the swirling clouds. The tornado was slowly becoming a great circle of swirling, moaning spirits. It's been fun, watching you try so hard. As May swirled around, the voice had come from just behind her, but there was no one there. A whisper continued in her ear, blowing her hair back. All that time you thought I wasn't there, on the train through the hideous highlands. Cabin 178. May's stomach twisted. Sitting on the back of the boat in the middle of the Dead Sea, catching up with her friends at the colony of the undead, in the hotel in Hocus Pocus. Those long talks with that pitiful, useless house ghost of yours. I was there for all of it. Just over your shoulder, watching, laughing. It was just all so thoroughly enjoyable. May was speechless. Chills crept up and down her body. I was there in Brewery Swamp, too. I heard the things you whispered to your cat when you thought no one was listening. May shook her head. Oh. The voice rasped, making May's ears tingle, a smile weaving its way through the words. Poor thing. Don't you understand? I'm everywhere. When you hear something go bump in the night, that's me. When you feel the hair stand on the back of your neck, I'm there. I'm the thing that lurks in the shadows. I am the starless night. Tell me, little speck, are you afraid of the dark? May felt something move behind her and turned to see a shadow forming in the window. It solidified into a figure of a in a dark hat, standing on the windowsill and staring out at the world below. He turned to her, his red eyes glowing menacing from beneath the brim of his hat. Otherwise, his face was covered in shadow. He was slouched, almost forlornly. Did you ever notice that you think something will make you feel different, but in the end, but you end up feeling the same? Let me say that again. I fucked that up. Did you ever notice that you think something will make you feel different, but you end up feeling the same? He asked. May didn't answer, but she thought of Pumpkin and how, with all his realm-wide fame, he still felt small. She thought of how, in Bree Swamp, she had wanted so badly for the other kids to really notice her, but when they had, it hadn't felt very good at all. She thought of herself, a true warrior now, still as scared as she had ever been. The truth is, I am an evil ruler success story, Bo Clevel said. The dark spirits love me. I control the entire world of the dead. Earth, he waved a hand at the air carelessly, will be a piece of cake, he said, he sighed theatrically. And still, I feel empty. The red glow of his eyes dampened just a little. May bit her lip, calculating what might happen if she made her move now. She could try and push him out of the window. She could. He pointed a hand toward her, and May felt a vice-like shadow wrap its way around her arms, squeezing her tight. She struggled, but she. Babadook? Oh shit, maybe. That kind of looks kind of like what he's supposed to look like. Yeah, it does look like him. Like, I could see it. I can totally see that. Right? Nice. Now you can have a face to Bo Clevel, but his red eyes and his face is all like covered in shadow. But yeah, it's basically kind of like the same thing. I see it. For some like adult version of Maybird, that'd be pretty cool. Okay. He pointed a hand toward her, and May felt a vice-like shadow wrap its way around her arms, squeezing her tight. She struggled, but couldn't move so much as an inch. It took her breath away. How easily he held her. Please don't think about interrupting again, Bo Clevel said. His eyes flamed red once more and bored right into her. And then his body relaxed again. Where was I? Oh yes, empty. But when I look at someone like you, so full of thoughts and colorful ideas, unique. His hot, cool eyes drifted to her short black hair, her skeletal disguise, her sparkling black bathing suit and pajama pants. I find it quite amusing that you spent so much of your time in Bree Swamp trying to hide it. trying to give away what makes you strongest. He tilted his head thoughtfully. Like I said, you and I are not so different. Are nuts. Eh. Like I said, you and I are not so very different. We're both singular sorts of spirits. We're both alone. Together, we could be something else entirely. You would never feel small again. May was speechless. Her eyes flew to the tornado outside where her friends were being swept away. There was no lady, no summer kitty, no anyone standing beside her. Oh, fuck. uh, no anyone standing beside her. But strangely, she didn't feel alone at all. She felt like everyone she felt like everyone who'd loved her and every brave thing she'd ever done stood behind her, holding her up. And May realized that something had changed for her, something she hadn't noticed before. She was scared, but she wasn't scared of being scared anymore. I'm not alone, she said. She squirmed suddenly, sliding out of the shadowy grip, and instead of lunging toward the door, she lunged toward Beau Clevel. The moment she did, the shadowy grip wrapped around her again and lifted her into the air. Well, that's very nice of you, Beau Clevel said, because things are about to get very scary. And with a wave of his hand, he lifted her higher into the air, stepping down from the windowsill and moving toward her. A great flapping sounded behind her, and they both turned to see the Book of the Dead, its thousands of pages frantically flipping behind them, flipping by themselves. Beau Clevel stayed where he was and looked up at her. So tell me, if you know so much, how do you think it ends? At that moment, something flashed through the room. Beau Clevel stumbled backward in surprise as the shadows were broken by a blinding white light. A great wind swept through the window, blowing them sideways, dangling. May lifted her arms in front of her eyes to shade them, squinting to see what it was. The Bridge of Souls sat in the middle of the room, gleaming brightly, leading up to where the ceiling had been. Only now, instead of a ceiling, there were countless stars in a dark sky. The wind howled and whistled hollowly. Still holding on to her, Beau Clevel laughed. I guess that settles it, he said. He turned back to her and smiled. It's a shame, really, but I guess it's your turn to cross. He advanced upon the bridge. May had only a moment to think. She swung herself forward, tumbling toward him and landing on his shoulders, piggyback style. Beau Clevel plucked her off like lice and flung her onto the ground, then leaned toward her. As he reached for her, she grabbed his hat, pulling it off, and scrambled backward. But then she saw what was underneath it. She froze. Nothing. Nothing but a pair of coal red eyes, drifting in space. His face was emptiness itself. In another moment, he had her by the arms, and she was lifted up again. He carried her to the very edge of the bridge, where she dangled, amazed and helpless. May bucked and wiggled wildly, her eyes drifting across the bridge to the blackness beyond. No! She cried. Goodbye, little speck. He dangled her a moment longer, winding up to throw her. The wind sucked her, the wind sucked at her hair, and her shroud like a vacuum cleaner. It howled through the room. The chairs around the table went flying across. The plates blew forward, smashing on the floor. And then there was a loud crash behind them. Bo Clevel swung back to look. The door had flung open. The door the door had flown open, and all in a rush there was a figure hurtling through it, long limbs flopping every which way, white face pale as moonlight, yellow tuft flopping wildly. Pumpkin's wide black eyes focus on the scene before him. Bo Clevel, the bridge, and May dangling before it. He charged and barreled right into Bo Clevel. May went flying sideways. She rolled across the floor, righting herself just in time to see Pumpkin and Bo Clevel, tangled together like strings, go barreling onto the bridge. The wind roared to a deafening pitch, sweeping them in a great gust all the way across. Pumpkin! May yelled, but as she lunged toward them, the room exploded in white light. Before May's eyes, the two separate figures began to change, turning into balls of the brightest white she could imagine, and the lights explode like fireworks and shot up, up, impossibly high, until they were only tiny pinpricks far above. They shot up, they shot up, they shot up, they shot upward for a second more, and then the wind around May died completely. The room went quiet, and the two white lights came to a rest far above, twinkling. May, her head craned back on her neck, watched in awe. Beside her, the bridge vanished as quickly as it had appeared, but the scene above did not. Bo Clevel's castle lay open to the sky. Yeah, there we go. Bo Clevel's castle lay open to the sky, a sky that held two newborn stars. May stood for a moment, disbelieving, afraid, devastated, and amazed. And then she heard an odd sound coming from outside the window. She rushed to see the tornado twisting its way back from the mountains and slowly dissipating, losing its speed, its tight gray spiral, become loose and misty. And from it, all sorts of objects had begun to fall. May squinted, trying to make it out. There was a man in a chef's hat, a specter in a toga, a ghost with horns and a beard. May peered up into the air. Thousands of spirits were falling from the sky, squealing, shouting, cheering. There were loud yee-haws and woo-hoos as the ghosts and specters of the ever after free fell back to the land. It was raining spirits. A smile crept onto May's lips, and then a sound behind her pulled her attention to the table. Though every other thing had been resting on the table had been blown off, the Book of the Dead still remained where it had been. It lay open, its pages flapping in the soft breeze. May drifted to it slowly, glancing up from time to time at the sky above, full of too many feelings to understand. She stopped at the edge of the table, leaning toward the book just slightly, as if she were wary of what she would find there. When she saw that it had opened to the A lump, a lump formed in her throat. Finally, the pages stopped turning. Her eyes slid on the right-hand side. Halfway down the pages was a name, buried between poltergeist, Polly, and puss and eyeball pie, that no one had ever bothered to look for. Pumpkin. Next to it was a single entry. Only slightly more responsible than May Ellen Bird for saving the world. And that is the end of chapter 35. Holy shit. I don't know if you heard, I was about to cry. My hands were shaking. My. Basically, first time I read it, I was like, oh no! They killed my favorite character! Ah! I feel like I need to wind down, but also I'm gonna still be like this until the book ends, and then I think I'm gonna start crying. We have 10 more pages to go. 10 more pages. How is this all going to end? Oh, fuck, dude. Okay. Chapter. My voice is probably gonna stay how it was the last, 5 minutes, because I'm on the verge of tears. But I still want to keep on reading to you guys. That's why I didn't stop reading, because if I stopped reading, I was gonna cry. But I wanted to finish this. Okay. Chapter 36. Love, patience, grace. Knock, knock, knock. May was the first one up in the colony of the undead that morning. She patted down the tunnel, wondering who could be at the door so early. She was wary as she opened the door a crack and looked outside, bewildered at what she saw. Outside on the sand there levitated a troop of elaborately dressed characters. They wore puffy velvet hats with feathers, brocade vests, and poofy pantaloons with tights underneath. One of them had a curly mustache and a pointy beard. "We are looking for a worthy house ghost by the name of Pumpkin," said the one with the beard. "Wouldst thou help us to locate him? We are in dire need of his talent." May studied the one with the beard. He looked familiar. School textbook familiar. And then it hit her who he was, and her throat started to go lumpy. And she wanted to laugh and cry at the same time. And instead of doing either, she invited them in for tea and explained to the Shakespeare Song and Dance Review just why Pumpkin wasn't there and what had happened to him and what he had done for the land of the dead. 3 months had passed since the day the sky had rained spirits. Since then, the ever after had not magically gone back to the way it had been. Nothing broken heals that quickly. That would take time and patience and hope, and slowly over years it would begin to grow back into what had been and went into what it had been. Maybe it would have been it would even be a little better. Already townsfolk had gone back to bustling about, sometimes laughing, sometimes crying, moaning, sometimes complaining. All the things that made the land of the dead lively. Now animals roam free all over the ever after. Some spirits had even learned what change was like, and they'd found out it really wasn't so bad. Already, over already all over the realm, Cleveland villas had begun to fall into disrepair, and colorful, messy, lopsided towns had begun to sprout around the decay. Nobody missed it when the occasional mischief maker stole one of the "Pardon Our Guests" signs for a souvenir to keep in their rooms to remind them of the battled days. a sapling had a sapling that had sprouted in the wasteland of Beau Clevel's fortress was rumored to be growing into a beautiful magnolia tree. The Lady of North Farm was said to have returned to the snowy valley behind the petrified pass, and spirits had begun to try to recall whether she was good or bad, or a mixture of both. The dark spirits, with no one to tell them what to do because they were not the brightest bulbs in the cosmic basket, had returned to their one while good callback. Yeah, had returned from their one wild night out on Earth, only to scratch their heads and look at one another blankly. By the following evening, they had all slunk back down to South Place, which they'd always preferred to Earth anyway. For years to come, they would tell stories about the night they had terrorized the living, repeating themselves over and over whenever there was a slimy ear to listen. Most of their grand goal, most of their grand goals found it horribly boring. At the colony of the undead, there had been picnics under the sipping stars, and parties in the main hall, and slumber parties on the newly built and the on the newly rebuilt roof. Bertha Brett Waller, Lawless Lexi, and the rest had been overjoyed when May, Beatrice, Isabella, Lucius, Fabio, and the cats came to stay. There had been many long nights spent talking over their adventures, and many quiet hours together when they thought only of Pumpkin and didn't say much at all. Weeks had turned into months, here stood May, and now here May stood, telling the Shakespeare Song and Dance Review something that still hurt too much to say. When she was finished relating the news, the troop fell silent and lifted off their caps, bowing low. He had the sweetest voice I've ever heard. The man with the beard, Will, as he asked May to call him, said. The troop, which had been captured by Beau Cleveland on the same day they'd auditioned Pumpkin, all murmured in agreement, and then sadly they all trailed off into the desert again. It was it was that day that May decided it was time to go. There were some things May was still not brave enough to do. When it was time for goodbye, Lucius stood there for a long time like they both wanted to say something, but neither of them did. Finally, Lucius spoke up. Finally, Lucius spoke. So, we'll see each other again, he said unsurely. May nodded. She reached out as if to touch his hand, but at the last moment she only pinched his shoulder and stuck out her tongue at him. He laughed and ducked forward as if to tackle her, but at the last minute turned to peck her on the cheek. In another moment, he'd zipped off in a brilliant ball of light. Fabio refused to come say goodbye. Beatrice accompanied her to the edge of the Nothing Plateau. She held her hand tightly and tried to look like she wouldn't cry. We'll be down to visit soon, she said. We'll take the train once it's up and running. They smiled at each other, remembering an earlier train journey together. They hugged and then they let each other go. In Belmorte, May did chores and helped Rista tend to the bees. She felt closest to Pumpkin there, and she felt she owed it to Pumpkin to look after these things, though she found that she was always making holes in Arista's bee suits, or setting all the bees free by accident. Often she'd stop Often she'd stop her chores to watch Somber Kitty in an absent smile. He was now the proud father of 6 ghostly kittens who trapezed about Beehive House and its gardens, ignorant that animals had ever been banished, or that there had been ever a spirit called Beauclerville. May sometimes watch May May watched him sometimes out of the corner of her eye, proudly guarding his brood. Often she wondered if he ever thought of home like she did. It was never a moment There was never a moment when home and her mom were absent from her thoughts, but she held her chin up. Sometimes. I guess they can. I forgot about that. Yeah, I guess they can. I'm just as confused as you are on it. When I read that, I'm just like, wait, what? And that's why I gave like a little laugh. I just exactly. See, it's little. Yeah, I know. I know. You don't have to tell me. I know. It's goofy. It's very goofy. But I love this book. So I love this goofy. You know what? You got a fair point. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what it feels like too. I don't know. Maybe it was a thing back then, and maybe even now. Because I know in Shrek, uh, Donkey had the babies in the second movie, and then what was it? There was another time where like, but yeah, that seems to be a theme. I don't know why. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Or the Lion King too. They have kid, a kid at the end. Charlotte's Web. I haven't really seen Charlotte's Web. I've seen parts of it. But yeah, that too. Some other stories too. Yeah, we should watch it. I remember in elementary school when it'd be like, I guess like rainy days or something like that, like classes would watch it. And like, I don't know, I'd get so envious because like my class wasn't like watching it. But I only saw like parts of it. But I never really knew what it was about. But yeah, we should. Excuse me. Ugh, we should watch it. Definitely. All right, back to the sadness. That is the end of the story. Okay. Fuck. Okay. Still, sometimes she stared at Pumpkin's grave and thought about trying to use it to haunt the earth, so she could have just a glimpse of her mother, even as a ghost. But she didn't want to end up as a lost soul. She never wanted to be lost again. At night, hold on. Okay, yeah. She never wanted to be lost again. At night, she and Arista sat by a cozy fire in the parlor, often in companionable silence. Kitty, Legume, and their kittens lounging all over their laps. Sometimes they talked about Pumpkin and all the funny things he used to do. Sometimes, when May stood in the backyard after Arista had gone to sleep, she was sure she could feel someone watching her, and she looked up at the zipping stars. She wondered which one he was. These days, she knew she had to be her own guiding star, but sometimes she liked to imagine Pumpkin helped. It was on such a night that the first extraordinary thing in a long time happened to May Ellen Bird. She was staring up at the stars when she saw something strange crossing the sky. For a moment, she gazed at it absently, merely curious, and then she realized it was getting closer and closer. It began to resemble a giant ball of fire headed straight for Belmorte. Get inside! She yelled, scooping up a handful of kittens and ushering Somber Kitty and Legume indoors, where Arista was puttering about the kitchen. Outside, the ground began to shake. They all dove under the kitchen furniture, and then, as quickly as it had begun, the shaking stopped. They looked at one another, scared witless, May's mind leaping to a million possibilities. But none of her conjectures prepared her for what she saw when she finally crawled up to the window and peeped outside. There, in the front yard, sat a long white rocket, emblazoned on one side with the word NASA. No sooner had this begun to sink in than around hatched. No sooner than this. No sooner had this begun to sink in than a round hatch. Then a round hatch opened with a hiss, and a familiar figure came tumbling out. Bertha, Bad Brett Waller. Seeing May in the window, she did a jolly little jig and motioned her to come outside. May zipped around into the yard, gaping in awe. But Bertha took it all in stride. Well, come on, girlie. We ain't got forever anymore. Hop in. Hop in? May repeated hollowly. You know, pick it up. Hit the road. Get a move on. I had to beg him to stop for you. They're in a real hurry to get back to Earth and tell him about. Ugh. I had to beg him to stop for you. They're in a real hurry to get back to Earth and tell him about this here world of ghosts. Apparently, it's a big deal down there to discover a star filled with the supernatural. May felt a moment of elation, her heart soaring as high as the tip of the rocket. And then, in the same moment, it plummeted. But Bertha. She looked Bertha up and down, her shoulders drooping as she then looked at herself. Samba Kitty and I were dead. Bertha let out an annoyed sigh. You think I ain't got that covered? Sheesh. I only been leading the Ever Afters living spirits for 100 odd years. You think I ain't got secrets? She pulled a little velvet pouch out of her overalls. The label on the front read, Rejuvenating Re-Life Powder, handcrafted by the spirits of North Farm. Honey, Bertha said, leaning inconspiratorially. Yeah, I think that's it. I've died 23 times since I got to the Ever After. This stuff costs an arm and a leg, but woo-wee, it is worth it. If old Lawless saw me dead, I'd never live it down. Now get on in, and you can sprinkle it on the way. May turned to Arista, who'd watched the whole scene, who had watched the whole scene and looked at him a question. My dear, I'd really rather you go. You are much better. You're a much better warrior queen than a house ghost. May was packed within minutes. She packed her and Kitty's death shrouds carefully away. How long had they been gone? A year? More? She hugged Arista goodbye, then Legume and the kittens one by one. Bertha was already in the rocket, waving at her through the window to get a move on. No, she has powder. Rejuvenating re-life powder. That she sprinkles on the person and then they're alive. I guess that's how it works. Yes, it is really huge, and they play it off like it's not a big deal. Yes, I know. It's. I wish I had an answer to you. I mean, yeah, you could, but you need to use it on the people that matter. Like Bertha Bread. Why isn't this a bigger thing? I know. And but they only use it on people that matter. Like Bertha Bad Breath Bretwaller and Maybird. And the North Farm spirits. Hey, they probably resurrected Jesus with this powder too, so come on. And then he fucking dipped. Yep. All right. Uh, yep. Hold on. Alright. They're just people in the hallway. May was, yeah. She hugged Arista goodbye, then Legume, and the kittens one by one. Bertha was already in the rocket, waving at her through the window to get a move on. Come on, kitty, she said, drifting for the door. Meow. May turned. Summer Kitty stood by Legume's side, looking at her plaintively. May put down her knapsack, walked back to him, and knelt down. Why hadn't it even occurred to her? How could she not have thought of it? Her bottom lip began to tremble. You want to stay? Kitty looked at her, then at Legume. Meow, he said again. May looked back over her shoulder at the shuttle. Could she leave Somber Kitty behind? Was that even something she had in her? She swallowed the lump in her throat, and she looked back at Kitty. She pulled him close to her and felt his soft warmth. She rubbed her cheeks against his dear fur, his dear fuzz. She whispered secrets to him that only the two of them had shared. She wanted to go, holding him forever, but finally she set him gently on the ground and stood up. Tell the others I'll see them again sometime. It was actually 23 times. 23 times. And no, taking a legume would be unethical. I wonder why that didn't show up. Or maybe it's just me? Oh, there we go. Well, it would be unethical because Legume died like a long time ago. And it'd be kind of weird if she went back to her home with Legume, like she's like, okay, she's not dead anymore. That would be kind of weird. The line I stop it at is that May and Kitty recently died. Legume died like a long time ago. Okay, I'm guessing Earth time May's been dead for maybe a year, maybe some like around a year. Just because of like how much time she spent in the ever after when she was dead. Or maybe longer than that. I'm not sure. It doesn't really explain. I think it is. I don't know, but that's just me. Maybe Legume is more comfortable in the now that she's dead. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it shouldn't be an issue, but also, I don't know. It's just That's what I think. I feel like Legume should stay in the Ever After. And Somber Kitty should go back with me. But that's just me. It's just been... Legume's been dead such a long time. I don't know. They could leave altogether if they wanted to, but... I don't know. It's weird, man. They could, theoretically speaking, take Legume too and the kittens too, but they didn't for whatever reason. Okay. But finally she set him gently on the ground and stood up. Tell the others I'll see them again. I'll see them again sometime, May said to Arista, hugging him again, and then feeling like she was ripping a piece of herself off and leaving it with Kitty, she followed Bertha to the hatch, not looking back. They buckled themselves in. The engines began to rumble. The hatch began to close, and then there was a loud screeching, and a dark blob came flying through the door, just before it shut. Kitty! May pulled Kitty to her tight and rubbed his ears with his on his fuzz, which he didn't like. She tucked him carefully into her seatbelt. They both looked out the window at what they were leaving behind. It's gonna be a wild ride. It's gonna be a wild ride, Bertha said, grinning at them from her seat ahead. She laughed in May's face, and May winced, only to be pleasantly surprised. Bertha's breath was minty fresh. The engines rumbled madly, and they blasted off. All of them shook as the shuttle ascended higher and higher into the air. It was another minute or so before May could gather herself enough to look out the window. It was another minute or so before May could gather herself enough to look out the window again. The star got smaller and smaller beneath them, and then it was only a round, glowing dot, and then it was surrounded by a mass of countless other stars, and then there was no looking back at all, because the Ever After was only a speck, lost in space behind them. And that is the end of chapter 36. And we reach the epilogue. Only 3 pages. Only 3 pages. This is probably... I like this ending. It's nice. Man, I feel like I'm gonna be really depressed after I finish reading this. Like, just this ended and, you know, there's no more stories or anything like that. It's just, it ends and we don't know, you know, anything else. All right. Epilogue. Fame was a funny thing. Amidst the world's realization, thanks to NASA, that ghosts not only existed, but had their own world several light years away, Maybird got lost in the shuffle. Only one reporter came to interview her, in the library of White Moss Manor with her mom, who wore a Maybird went to the land of the dead, and all she brought me was this lousy t-shirt. And he left looking sorely disappointed. There was too much about saving the world and not enough about dead celebrities. The story never ran. That was fine with May and her mom. They preferred it that way. There were nights baking cookies and nights curled up on the sofa watching movies, nights where they sat with Somber Kitty between them and talked for hours. May's mom listening raptly to May's stories of the Ever After, her eyes widening to hear of the carnival at the edge of the world, or twinkling at the tales of Pumpkin's goofy antics, or rolling as May tried to recite from memory one of Fabio's poems, or one of the knaves' songs of thievery. At times like these, Kitty purred with contentment, and they knew for that moment he'd stop thinking of Legume for just a little while, happy to be exactly where he was. But nothing in the world stays still. They broke ground. They broke ground for a group of sparkling white condominiums in the spring following May's return, and downtown Bury Swamp was suddenly aflutter with newness. All of it encroaching to the trees. And then it seemed like no time at all before May was in high school, and trading nights on the couch with her mom for nights under the stars with her friends, cold bleacher afternoons with classmates at football games, wonderful costume parties with lots of new people to meet, cozy poetry readings with the Y'all Come In cafe at Hog Wallow. Shyness still crept up on her sometimes when she least expected it, but then she only smiled at it like an old reliable friend. She even found that when she showed parts of herself that seemed strange or wild, people usually smiled and then shared crazy ideas of their own. It seemed, when all was said and done, that all souls were a little wild in some way or another. Outside White Moss Manor, the woods slowly receded, no longer waiting and whispering outside the house's windows, full of secrets. The condos that took their place stretched all the way through what had once been the great briar patch, and slowly grew around a lake that had reappeared, a tiny black circle in the cloudless clearing. When May went off to college, Mrs. Bird and Somber Kitty sat on the porch rocking many nights, wondering what she was doing at that moment and hoping she was happy. She was studying for her final exams the night that Somber Kitty passed away in his sleep. He had been dreaming of pyramids. May rushed home the next day, and she and her mom buried him in the backyard, next to Legume. May did not wear black. She did not need to wear something to touch the grieving in her heart. That year, several inhabitants of the Bury Swamp condos went missing. Nobody blamed it on the lake, but several families began to move just the same. With the surreal quickness that no one could explain, the houses became vacant and the development bankrupt, and the buildings began to be eaten up by the woods again. In a few years' time, they would be gone completely. Only White Moss Manor would remain. Bury Swamp had always belonged to the woods anyway. One dusky evening, far above, and the ever after, a fuzzy, bald, big-eared spirit arrived in Belmorte after a long journey. He was surprised to find Fabio, Lucius, Bea, and Isabel already there. They had all, over the years, gravitated to Belmorte, as if in anticipation of something they couldn't yet name. They made a merry group, playing hide and seek in the village, helping Arista with his bees, playing Scrabble around the cozy kitchen table until Fabio usually got caught cheating. And still, at night sometimes, Somber Kitty would sneak out at the edge of the yard, patting out under the sky full of zipping stars, and stare across the horizon, as if he could just make something out. Coming across the desert. He sometimes sat all night, flapping his tail expectantly waiting for Maybird to come home for good. And that is the beautiful end of Maybird. fuck, dude? I was trying so hard not to cry. Summer Kitty! He had to die in the end, but he died in a peaceful way. I know, right? And then, look here, look here. I know. I want to cry so bad, too. Like, my heart is racing. Like, just racing like a NASCAR driver. But look at this. This is pretty cool. This is at the very end of the book. Like, the very end. And we can see here. Well, you probably can't see it very well unless I can't zoom in on it. But that's, I guess, who Summer Kitty was based off of, I guess, in a way. It says, for the readers that can't read it, Jodie, the first part is Jodie Lynn Anderson grew up in New Jersey, where she spent her time walking in the woods and pretending she was queen. Today, she spends her time daydreaming and making things up. And then the other thing is Pony Boy, pictured below, claims that he bears no relation to Summer Kitty whatsoever. But since he only knows how to speak in meows, people merely scratch his ears and ask him if he is hungry. As you can see, this fills him with melancholy. And that's a picture of the cat. Yeah, right? Yeah. Man, I love this book. Also, I should stop this recording because people think this is too long. But thank you. Thank you so much for being with me and my boyfriend and my other friends on this incredible journey. To Jodie Lynn Anderson, I love this book. I hope if you ever on YouTube and you find these, I hope you don't sue me for like copyright issues or anything like that. Or I hope not Facebook. I hope, YouTube doesn't take this down because of copyright issues. But Jodie, I really love this book. I love this series. It's great. And all its goofy, glorious glory. I love this book. Thank you for writing it. All right. Thank you, everyone listening. I love you. I'm going to pick out my next book later. I think I know which one I'm going to read next. So be prepared for that. Thank you so much. Have a good day.